I was just telling some folks earlier, we like to record these and post them on our website because we always have requests for folks that aren't able to attend and that they love to be able to view these later. So hopefully that's not a problem for you and you can give us permission and we'll go ahead and record. We're also have the closed caption capability turned on. So if that is helpful to you, please go ahead and view that closed caption. Hildegard's going to pull up our PowerPoint and I'm going to go through just again a few housekeeping slides and then we will get started. So while she's pulling those up, just to let you know that we do have you all muted right now. We love you all, but we want to be able to not have extraneous noise and so forth while we're going through the speaker portion of our agenda. And so if you've got questions as we go through this first hour or so of the agenda, please use the chat function. We've got folks manning that chat function and they'll answer questions that come up if there are questions that they can answer, and they'll tabulate questions for our panelists as well for later. So please use that function. Okay, next slide, Hildegard. So here's what we're going to be doing today. We're really excited. This is the year, as we keep saying, for redistricting, and this is our second advocacy day. We had one in the springtime, and we really felt like we needed to have another one now as we're coming into the actual redistricting cycle and the special session that's upcoming here soon. And we want to really give you some tools, some information, and then some tools to help us with the advocacy that we need to ramp up over this next month or so. I'm going to share a little bit about the timeline. We're going to have our keynote speaker today, our national expert, David Daley, that I'll introduce here in a minute. And then we've got an all-star legislative panel that'll join David for what we think is going to be a very interesting discussion. And then we'll go into the second half really of the day. And this is to, again, arm you to be a citizen advocate and give you a chance to actually trial some of that out in a very easy way on our virtual rope line. And then we'll do some wrap up. Next slide. So just to remind you all, if you've been to Fair Districts events, you have seen this slide a million times, but we are a nonpartisan organization and we are really focused on long-term on redistricting reform in Georgia. During this year, this important redistricting year, our focus is on really advocating for fair maps and a fair redistricting process. And undergirding that is the reality that we know that Georgia is now a swing state. And we believe that our legislative and congressional districts should really reflect that. And as we always say, fair elections in Georgia are not just fair voting rights, which obviously is an important issue and a timely issue here in Georgia, but fair districts is the other flip side of that coin for fair elections. Next slide. So just to remind you where we're at in the process before we go to our speakers. So we had public hearings across the state this summer that the redistricting committees held in a joint fashion. And we had the August 12th release of the census data. So the map drawing process has certainly begun by the state, and it has allowed us to also start cranking that data for our work with the Princeton Gerrymandering Project that we'll talk about a little bit more later as well. So we are now at the point of being able to come out with those benchmarks. We plan to publicly release those in our town hall on September 27th. And then we will be going into this period while the legislature completes the drawing of the maps. And we anticipate right now that a special session will be held in early November. And we'll ask our legislative panelists if they have any more information about that. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our keynote speaker for today. Really excited to have David Daley joining us today. He was here about a year ago and really launched our work for this year with Fair Districts Georgia. And one thing that he doesn't have on his bio that I'm going to review here in a second is the fact that he's really the person that facilitated the introduction to the Princeton Gerrymandering Project for our team. And so a lot of the work that we have done this year has really been because of David's help and support to make that partnership real. So David is the author of, I've got both of my copies here, of Rat Fucked. I don't normally say that word. Why Your Vote Doesn't Count, and also Unrigged, How Americans Are Battling Back to Save Democracy. David, I bought a copy of this for every single person on our legislative advocacy committee because we were so interested in how citizens across the country are battling back for democracy. David's work on voting rights and democracy issues have been published in the New Yorker, the New York Times, the Atlantic, Washington Post, and many other publications, and was the basis for the award-winning documentary Slay the Dragon. If you haven't already seen that, I highly recommend Slay the Dragon, and you'll see David highlighted in there along with the work of some of the citizens that he is profiled in Unrigged. His reporting uncovered the secret files of Thomas Hoffler and helped contribute to the citizenship question being struck for the 2020 census. So he is really an advocate in addition to bringing all this wonderful information. He's taught political science and journalism as a fellow at Wesleyan University, Boston College, and the University of Georgia. Former editor-in-chief of Salon and a senior fellow now at Fair Vote, and he's coming to us from Western Massachusetts. So David, we're thrilled to have you and interested in your thoughts and advice for us for our citizen advocacy here in Georgia.
Well, thank you, Janet. I am thrilled to be here. Thank you, Ken. Hello to Chairman Anderson, Senator Parent, Representative Hugley. It's an honor and a pleasure to be with you here today. This is really what democracy looks like. If you want to feel the passion that we need to protect and defend free and fair elections in this nation, the urgency that this task will require, the work it is going to take, look around this call, look around this advocacy day. This fight is hard, but it is the fight that matters. Listen, I write a lot about how the toxic combination of gerrymandering, closely followed by voter suppression laws passed by unaccountable legislatures, has tied our democracy into a double knot of unfairness. And in many ways, it's not easy to see a solution for this anti-democratic crisis that has contributed so dramatically to the extremism and polarization that plague our politics. But that hasn't stopped any of you. I have watched the organizing you all have done, the Zoom events throughout the states, the meetings in person where you can. I've read the dozens of letters to the editor you all have published across the state, the lines at the public hearings this summer, watch citizens master the intricacies of the legislative process in a state where insiders like to operate behind closed doors, marveled as you have focused public attention on a wonky process some people don't understand, and that politicians often like it that way. You're forcing this into the sunlight. Seeing you draw sample maps, you've built this alliance with the Princeton Gerrymandering Project. When your legislature enacts maps, thanks to your work, citizens and media will be able to analyze their impact immediately and test them for fairness. None of this existed a decade ago. You built it, you made it so. Every single one of you will make the state's entrenched political elite tremble. This is, in many ways, the next American revolution. It is a demand for fairness, the insistence that our vote is our voice, that our district lines are the very building blocks of our democracy. It is grounded in the belief that our leaders are temporary, but the people rule, that we have no more important task in front of us than preserving this democracy and the hard-won right to participate in it. It's about holding our officials accountable to a higher good, even when some of them kick and scream, that winning elections or maintaining partisan control is not as important as ensuring that our institutions are strong, that our elections are meaningful, that our votes count, and that they translate equitably into seats, that a majority of Americans standing together win the right to choose their own leaders. The promise endures, right? Because we all believe that we have the power to fix what is often broken. And we know what's broken. Georgia, in many ways, has been ground zero for what is broken. What I want to do is try to renew your faith that hard work in our collective fight can fix what is broken. I want to send you off into this advocacy day with the energy and the courage and passion you will need to vigorously pursue this fight, because Georgia needs you, and because you are a swing state, this nation needs you. And I know that you can do this because I have spent the last couple of years traveling the country, chronicling the citizens who, like you, decided they would become the change they were looking for. I've door knocked across Utah and Missouri and Michigan with canvassers who won astonishing redistricting reform in states in shades more purple and red than anywhere. I watched Native Americans across Utah and North Dakota mount frenzied pushes to determine their street addresses and make themselves tribal IDs, and the legislature demanded the one form of identification they knew the tribes did not have. I rode the Medicaid Express, a rickety green RV across Idaho with gutsy millennial activists who didn't understand why their legislature wouldn't accept their own tax dollars back from Washington to ensure that 70,000 of their neighbors had health care. Watched as former felons in Florida, black and white, Democrats and Republicans, ex-cons and second chance believing churchgoers, tattooed Trump-loving deplorables and radical criminal justice reformers alike, built a mighty moral coalition. I talked to the petitioners in Maine who had to circulate these petitions in the winter, not once, not twice, but 3 times, and win 3 times in order to win ranked choice voting there, to the mathematicians who formed a democracy-saving geek squad and helped use really smart computer algorithms to unravel maps that politicians in Pennsylvania and North Carolina rigged with the help of similar big data. These folks won. They won big, and they won everywhere. Gerrymandering, maybe it used to put people to sleep. Now it makes them good and mad. If it used to make eyes glaze over, well, now folks are fully woke. You've made real change. You've got everybody's attention. I was pretty certain we didn't need another book about how democracy dies. What I wanted to do was go out and join these quiet revolutionaries who were reinvigorating our civic fabric at the time we needed it most. And I saw these citizens demolish barriers that all the experts said were too stout, too high, too imposing. On election night 2016, Katie Fahey, she was 27 years old. She left her job at a Grand Rapids recycling nonprofit. She put on her best red pantsuit and she flew to New York with a golden ticket for Hillary Clinton's victory party. That evening did not go as Katie planned, but the next morning before work, already fearing the family Thanksgiving battles, the flying mashed potatoes that were going to take place, she took to social media. I'd like to take on gerrymandering in Michigan, she wrote. If you're interested in doing this as well, please let me know. Well, maybe it connected because of the smiley face emoji that she added next. Or maybe it was because, just like in Georgia, Michigan, the gerrymanders had severed the connection between the ballot box and the people's will. That single post by a regular citizen pioneers a winning redistricting revolution in a state where no one believed it could happen, marshaled 4,000 volunteers, collected more than 400,000 signatures, the first effort to make the ballot there without paid signature collectors. They won in November of 2018 with more than 62% of the vote. It wasn't long after that I met Desmond Meade in Florida. He'd taken on the difficult task of returning voting rights to almost 1.7 million people who had a felony conviction in their past in Florida, who effectively had lost their civic voice forever with that conviction, even though they'd served their time. It was a cruel vestige of the Jim Crow South that still, up to this day, had ensnared 10% of adults in the state, 25% of African-American males. Let me tell you, Desmond has got this inner glow, and he knew the pain of this because he was one of those silenced citizens. Drug addiction and a deep depression had led to a felony weapons charge. One afternoon after his release, homeless, still struggling with drugs, he stood before the railway tracks outside Miami, steeled himself to jump in front of the next train. The train didn't come that afternoon. He walked across those tracks instead. You can't make it up, right? As if guided by a higher power, he finds himself outside a drug treatment center a few blocks away, checks himself in, turns his life around, returns to college, gets a law degree. But what he wanted was his right to vote back as well. He becomes the director of the Florida Rights Restoration Commission. He builds that mighty moral movement. And on election day 2018, even as Florida elects a Republican governor, a Republican US senator, 64% of the state backs a constitutional amendment that restored their voting rights. The people of Florida voted for fairness. There's proof here that hard work, that collective fight can make a difference, that these citizens could become the change they wanted to see. In Idaho, that Medicaid expansion initiative, it began after 2 recent graduates from a high school in the northernmost notch of the state. Now they were studying medicine and history, but they realized they had organizing skills that might help a much needed school levy overcome bitter, well-funded opposition in their hometown. They won, and that made them hungry for more. They settled on healthcare as an issue. They painted that 40-year-old RV green. They called it the Medicaid Express. They crusaded to every corner of Idaho, collecting signatures. This is a one-party state. It's redder than Taylor Swift's lipstick, right? But they captured 61% of the vote there, and they did it the old-fashioned way. They persuaded their neighbors that this was the right thing to do. These efforts, they weren't led by politicians or by political parties. They began with regular people. They began with everyday citizens asking how they could contribute and make a difference, and they found answers right in their home states. None of these battles were easy. You all know this. Many of these initiatives were challenged in court. They've since perhaps sometimes been watered down by courts and legislators afterwards. They had to overcome a lot of negative money, a lot of legal efforts. The forces that are lined up against reform don't quit, and sometimes you're fighting your very own representatives. But the crucial battle had been engaged. A torch had been lit, and citizens took off sprinting with it. We know what you're up against in Georgia. We know from the 250, 300 bills that have been filed around the country, making it more difficult to vote over the course of this year. The history of voting rights in this country, it's one of expansion and one of retraction. It has never been a straight line forward. And this current fight is really the latest chapter in a struggle over the vote that is as old as the nation itself. We might like to imagine that our nation's story is one of ever-expanding suffrage, with courts protecting and defending this fundamental freedom, but it's never been that simple. The struggle didn't end with the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment, with the 19th Amendment, with the Voting Rights Act, or certainly not with the resounding passage of these democracy reforms in 2018 and 2020. The work that remains is only going to get harder. But that's to be expected, right? Our frayed democracy, it's more fragile perhaps than many of us realized a few years ago. It's not going to be healed with any one election or any individual victory, but by the number of battles and people engaged in them. Success does not mean the end of a fight, and keeping a democracy requires a lot of work. I want to leave you with a story from Alabama that it was just overwhelming to witness. There was a night when a woman named Sherry lost her voting rights forever, and it began like any other teenage evening in late 90s rural Alabama. High school friends in a classmate's ride, drive-through dinner on the hood of a car, someone passes around a joint, the sound of a police car, a couple of white officers wondering what that smell might be. Plenty of cops might have looked the other way, let the kids off with a warning. It probably did work out that way in Tonya suburbs, maybe even that very evening. Sherry's evening ended with drug possession charges for everyone. In the eyes of the state, they were no longer high school seniors, they were felons. And in Alabama, felons guilty of a crime involving moral turpitude, like this minor possession charge, forfeited their right to vote forever. Sherry was 17. She'd never used that right to vote, erased before she even had an opportunity to exercise it. I had no idea, she told me. But those laws from the Jim Crow era, hardly consigned to history, would ensnare her. Finally, 160 years later, Alabama's legislature would end moral turpitude for all but the most serious crimes. But the state was determined to keep that news as quiet as possible. They wouldn't update the forms, let alone notify people that they could vote again or instruct parole officers to help. We all see the news from Texas and other states. You know what happens if you vote illegally accidentally. That's not a risk people often want to take. And so citizens started going door to door, bus stop to bus stop in search of these people. And that's where I met Sherry and heard her story outside the Birmingham bus station just after 6 a.m. one summer morning. When we approached and asked if she was registered to vote, she waves us away, embarrassed, uneager to respond on her way to work. We talked about how we were out informing people about a change in the law, that a felony conviction no longer costs people a permanent right to vote. And her eyes grew wide. She's like, I can't vote, I have a conviction. We hand her the clipboard of these serious crimes. Of course, it's nothing like that. And because that's not, we could sign her up on the spot. It only took a couple of minutes and there wasn't a dry eye left there. I've never voted, she says. I was 17 and thought I never would. I will be a lifelong voter. And that's what this is about. That's who we are fighting for. This is a nation that has been built by people, improved by the people, whether these are the women walking for suffrage or John Lewis and the marchers across Selma's Pettus Bridge. Progress has been long, progress has been hard, progress has been of our own making. Just days before his death in July 2020, John Lewis asked to visit the new Black Lives Matter Plaza in Washington, D.C., blocks from the White House. He was frail with a cane. He took in the scene from a nearby rooftop and then walked the street below. And in a powerful essay published posthumously in the New York Times, he wrote about that final trip, how inspired he was to see the power of citizens once more. Democracy is not a state, it is an act, he wrote. Ordinary people with extraordinary vision can redeem the soul of America by getting what I call good trouble, necessary trouble. Voting and participating in the democratic process are key. The vote is the most powerful nonviolent change you have in a society. You must use it because it is not guaranteed. This is the everyday work of citizens, understanding that democracy is an action, something within ourselves that we must work to perfect every day. That is the work that has built this nation at its best, and what we must do once more to renew our determination that we reach those ideals for everyone. The life of John Lewis shows that this capacity for perseverance and tremendous courage lies within us all. The struggles ongoing at his death show us how far we still have to go. We know that our democracy is broken. We know that it's been broken actively and intentionally by partisans who put narrow ideological interest above all else, who choose to aggressively gerrymander and ignore the will of the people rather than committing themselves to listen to and represent everyone in a vibrant and ever-changing nation. We are coming for you. We are taking it back. These citizens who had never before joined a protest, took to the streets, circulated petitions, stepped forward to run for office, launched new organizations or joined movements that might reimagine what democracy means. They ignored those who said the work would be too hard, scorned their efforts as irrelevant, or warned that the odds of victory seemed far too uncertain for such tremendous effort. And then they devoted long hours. They came together by the thousands, in RVs, in courtrooms, in bus stations, knocking on doors on frigid winter mornings. And they made those dreams real at the ballot box. They won resounding majorities of their fellow citizens, inspiring Americans in red states, in blue states, in every state, who still believe that all political power is inherent in the people, that all legitimate authority depends on the consent of the governed, that representative democracy must represent us all equally. We can find hope in the energy and the devotion of our fellow citizens, and we can commit to build a nation in which every voice is heard and carries the same weight. The lesson of Katie Fahey, of Desmond Meade, of these marchers for social justice, and every one of these volunteers, all of you, is that we do not need superheroes to save us. These battles on behalf of what is right, they've been led by millennials. They have been led by people who have been released from prison. They've been led by suburban women, by Americans of all ages and races who refuse to believe that the act of creating change is beyond them. It is the proof. There is a mighty unrigging underway. And I hope that this story leaves you with a rebirth of optimism and sends you off into this advocacy day, fighting hard for the change that Georgia needs. I thank you very much.
Thank you, David. Exactly what we were hoping for, inspiring us all as we come together for this advocacy day. Thank you very much. So we're going to add to our panel now for panel discussion. Two of our legislators. Unfortunately, I don't believe that Senator Anderson has been able to join us yet. If she joins along the way, Julia, I'm sure you can put her into the mix, but joining us is, first of all, Senator Elena Parent. And just to let you all know, she's my senator. But she was elected to the state Senate in 2014 and represents District 42, which includes Central and North DeKalb County. And she also was served in the State House, and she'll probably share with us a little bit here about her experience serving in the State House and then being gerrymandered into a paired district. So she comes about her knowledge about gerrymandering and her passion about redistricting from personal experience. She's now the chairwoman of the Senate Democratic Caucus. She is an attorney by original training, a graduate of University of Virginia and the University of Virginia School of Law. So welcome, Senator Parent, to the panel and the discussion.
Thanks for having me.
And then also want to introduce Representative Carolyn Hugley. And Representative Hugley was elected to the Georgia State House overwhelmingly with 80% of the votes back in 1992. So she is a long-term representative serving her 14th term in office, represents District 136, which is really the Columbus area of the state. And she graduated with bachelor's in political science from the University of Arkansas, and then went on for a master's degree in public policy and administration from Mississippi State University. And she also is an independent contract agent for the State Farm Insurance Company. And Representative Hugley has had experience serving on the redistricting committees in the past and is a lead by the request of Leader Beverly in the House to be the lead for the Democratic Caucus on redistricting. And just in case we get this question, we did put out invitations to Republicans to join this conversation, and unfortunately did not have any take us up on it. So, but we're thrilled with the expertise that we have with Senator Parent and Representative Hugley joining the discussion. So let me start off with a few questions. And again, remember that if you can put your questions in the chat, both for David and for our legislators, and we'll get to those in just a few minutes. So first of all, as I started off the program, this is obviously the year, and redistricting is now underway. I'm going to ask each of our legislators to just give us a little bit of a feel for what you expect in this current redistricting process and what your biggest concerns are. Senator Parent, you want to start us?
Sure. Thank you, Janet. Good afternoon to everyone. David, it's lovely to be on a panel with you. I have long admired your work, and I'm grateful for those inspirational words for all of our citizen activists, as well as all of us legislators who are interested in seeing democracy work in Georgia. I should quickly mention that Senator Anderson texted me that she was having some technical difficulties. So we'll see if she's able to work those out, but just wanted to let everybody know that. Here's what I expect. I think that the Republicans are looking at the census numbers, realizing that Georgia remains a rapidly growing and diversifying state. They recognize that the voters that are the most loyal to them traditionally are shrinking in number, or at the very least not growing as quickly as all of the other demographics in our state, namely minority voters as well as educated voters the parts of the state that are growing rapidly are also ones where Republican power has waned. So I expect that they are, as we speak, very busy trying to craft a map that will, at the very least, ensure majorities in both chambers, if they can pull it off, that would outlast the decade. I think that will be their goal. The law has changed not in our favor since 2010 because of Shelby County versus Holder. There's no longer pre-clearance required from the Department of Justice for maps to go into effect, as well as the Supreme Court's, I believe, very flawed decision in Richo v. Common Cause that stated that it could be a permissible state objective or state interest to draw maps that were gerrymandered in a partisan manner. On the flip side, the rapidly changing face of Georgia and the fact that the Republicans gerrymandered the maps pretty extensively 10 years ago presents them with a real challenge as they try to not violate the Voting Rights Act, since we have large numbers of minority communities, especially historically disenfranchised African-American communities. They're still constrained by the law as to racial gerrymandering, as well as the fact that there's just far fewer proportion of Republican voters in this state now than there were 10 years ago. And another thing I expect is that they will have their talking points down, and they will have been well instructed, all of them, as to exactly what to say and exactly how to behave during this session. And so advocates having the right questions to ask, to probe, I think is going to be important.
Great. Thank you, Senator Parent. Representative Hugley, your thoughts?
Well, thank you so much, Janet, first of all, for having me join you all today. And David was simply outstanding. I'm happy that I was able to hear his inspiring message. I think the senator has outlined what is likely to happen very well. The only thing that I would add to that is the fact that the Republicans seem to be delighted to use the fact that Attorney General Holder passed the 2010 maps, and they are running around saying that we are fair because AG Holder passed our maps, and so we know how to draw fair maps. We won't do what the Democrats have done years and years ago, but the fact of the matter remains that we have more technology available to us now than ever before. And we have the capacity now more than ever before to draw maps that will allow, as David said, the ballot box to reflect the will of the people. And so that is what we should demand in this particular legislative session. So I agree with the senator that in the House in particular, they're going to be challenged to try and maintain all of their members, because anything in my part of the state and down further, the numbers are declining. And so the hope is that the excess from the metro area will come down and make some of these districts whole. But they are challenged this year. And our job and the advocates' job is to make sure that we do everything that we can to protect the rights of citizens to make their voices heard and not be drawn into a district that will minimize or eliminate those voices. So with that, I will yield.
Yield from the well, right? Thanks for that. So one of our questions from one of our participants today, from Vicki Krugman, who has been very active in fair districts and lives over in Athens, Her question is, what's the single most effective way to influence redistricting this year in Georgia? David, let's start with you. What are your thoughts about what are in the environment that we have here, where we obviously have a one party in control, the trifecta? What would you say might be lessons from other places?
Transparency. You can fight for a free and fair and open process. You can show up and you can map your communities of interest, and you can make clear what those communities look like. You can show up at public hearings and you can testify about what a fair map means to you, about the values that you would like to see reflected in these district lines that are just so crucial. And you can begin to hold people's feet to the fire. This is an act of accountability. When you don't have the numbers, you have to work where you can to take the victories that are possible. And I think showing up and telling legislators that this matters, that this has to be conducted in public, and that we are watching, it may not stop them, but it will scare them a little bit. And you will pull this from the shadows a little more into the public. You've got a news media that is very anxious to tell these stories, and I think is telling these stories about voting better than we ever have before, perhaps. And we'll be analyzing these maps, and you will be doing the work with Princeton and other folks to be able to see through what they have done almost immediately. You'll be able to analyze these maps and to see what the breakdown looks like, and how fair these maps are or are not. You're not going to have to wait until the 2022 elections to have a sense of what has happened to them. You will know right away. And public outrage and media attention and just refusing to let go of the demand for fairness in these lines is going to be everything. And you just keep showing up. I mean, there was a question in the chat about, well, Georgia's not Michigan, we don't have an initiative process. Look at Virginia. Virginia did not have an initiative process, but One Virginia 2021 was able to, just like you all are trying to do through lobby days, through letters to the editor, through activism and action, they built a coalition in Richmond that was cross-partisan and was able to, in 2018 and 2019, win votes that then sent a constitutional amendment to the voters in 2020. And they've got a commission drawing lines right now. It's not a perfect commission by any stretch of the imagination, but it's out of the back room and citizens have got a hand there. Virginia does have a Democratic-led state house, but the first vote on this happened when Republicans were in charge in 2018. The second vote happened when Democrats were in charge. So this can be won when people do the work and show up, but understand it is a long-term process, and you might not have the victory you want immediately. You've got to keep fighting. You've got to stay in the game.
Senator Parent or Representative Hugley, anything to add in terms of the way to effectively influence redistricting this year?
Why don't you go first, Representative Hugley? You've got several cycles under your belt, and then I'll wrap up.
Well, I would say that the first thing that I would advise anyone to do is to speak to the person who represents you. Speak to that person and let them know that you're concerned about the maps and concerned about what's happening in the legislative process. And also keep up, as David has said, with what's going on, show up. That's very important. And make sure that your legislature understands that the district does not belong to that person, but it belongs to your community. And speak about it in terms of what impact will this process have on your community and your opportunity to choose the person that you'd like to see representing your particular area. So the more people participate, the more people talk to their legislator, their House member and their senator, and don't limit it to one side of the aisle. Start with yours first, and then talk to people in your general area about what this is going to mean and why it's important to you and why it's important to your community. Sunshine is the best disinfectant. Transparency is something that we all need to see. I can remember sitting through redistricting sessions when no one was at the Capitol except the legislators. And you might have a lobbyist here or there that peep in to see what was going on, but the general public did not really pay that much of attention. I'm so excited that this year the public is paying attention. People are getting involved. People did come to the public hearings, and I want to thank Fair Districts for being part of that. And I want to encourage you to encourage others to continue to move and to work and to participate, because the legislature is gonna draw these maps, and the Republicans, let me just say, the Republicans are gonna draw this map. But how we respond to that now and in the future will make the difference. So I'll yield to you, Senator, and let you go from there.
Well, I love hearing, you're exactly right. Even 10 years ago, which is the first one I ever participated in, folks were much less dialed in than they are now. And that is so exciting to see, because this issue is so foundational to any other issue. Any priority that you would like to see enacted by your government is going to flow through people who are elected from districts. So nothing can get done. And that's really been the task. And Fair Districts has been doing such an excellent job in educating the public about why this matters before you can even get to any other issue that you care about, that grabs your attention, that you want to see progress on. I think there are several advantages here in 2021 that I want to quickly mention. First is the much more widespread ability of citizens and groups like Fair Districts to draw maps and present them and easily disseminate them to activists. With that ability also comes the ability to quickly analyze the maps that the Republicans are going to unveil. So I think we know that they're going to draw these districts to try to hold on to waning power. And there's only several ways that they can do that. And namely, they involve cracking and packing, right? They are not going to say that, though. What advocates for Fair Districts are going to be able to draw is a much fairer and better looking map that more accurately reflects the people of our state. We know that the growth has come from mainly minority communities. And what we're going to see unveiled is not a map that reflects that. It's not going to accurately reflect where the growth has been in Georgia and the changing face and preferences of Georgians, right? So they're going to have excuses and rhetoric as to why their map looks the way it does. But all of you are going to have facts and maps that look a lot better and are clearly more fair, given what Georgia is and the multiracial and multi-ethnic coalitions that have been ascendant in the last elections. You're going to have that to say, what's wrong with this map? And they're going to just have these excuses and this rhetoric, but it's not going to be that easy for them, because it will be darn obvious exactly what's going on, but they're not going to want to say it. They're not going to want to say, well, we drew this for partisan advantage, although frankly, they may, because that's been sanctioned by the Supreme Court. So it may be that they run around finally and just start saying, yeah, we drew this for partisan advantage. But they're going to be a little bit scared about that, like David referenced, because it can provoke backlashes, especially in the face of the voter suppression bill, SB 202, and all the other national attention around Georgia. And the optics of it are just bad. And they're aware that raw exercise of partisan power like that can provoke a backlash. It's likely that Georgia is actually already a majority minority state or very, very close to it in the last year since the census was conducted. So just by showing up, I think, and the fact that we can so easily share with the population exactly what they're up to. And Republicans don't like it either, because they also want, Democrats and Republicans want to be able to elect their elected officials. And they also don't want to be gerrymandered out of power when their party is not in power, right? So I think these are all advantages that advocates have going for them this year that we didn't have even 10 years ago.
Great, thank you, Senator Parent. And as you can see, Senator Anderson has joined us. I know today was a travel day for her, so I'm really pleased that you were able to work through the technology and join us, Senator Anderson. Let me just do a little bit of an intro for our audience. Senator Anderson was elected to the Georgia State Senate in the 43rd Senate District in 2016, and her district includes part of DeKalb, Rockdale, and Newton counties. She has a long history of public service, including being Lithonia mayor and also state representative for House District 92. And this year, she has the privilege of being the chair of the Georgia Legislative Black Caucus. And the Black Caucus has been very active in this redistricting cycle. So maybe we can start with asking you to tell us a little bit about that, Senator Anderson. What's the strategy of the Black Caucus in this redistricting cycle?
So thank you so much for having me. I did have a bit of a struggle, and I'm not sure why. Anyway, we're on now, and so I have to back up and pause for a moment to say that I am I won't say a product of, but my first term in the House was a newly drawn district after 2010 through the redistricting, and so. I know the importance of educating our community, because being on the local level, I don't even think I had an idea as to how much redistricting impacted our community. So the Black Caucus has been very active in the community. We have been caucusing, as they say, along with our allies, Fair Districts, Fair Count, and I appreciate you guys so much for the partnership. But the main thing that we've been telling the community, the message we've been resonating in the community is that we have to educate our community on the importance of reapportionment and redistricting and how this impacts us for years to come. We have to be educated, because I've bragged and bragged and bragged, and I've said that we will be in the majority. We don't need to get ready. We need to be ready to draw these maps the way fair and equitable maps when it is our turn to do so. We're preaching about it now, but we're going to be about it when we're in the majority. So we are educating our community on the importance of it. We are collaborating with our allies, Fair Count, Fair Districts, League of Women Voters, all of our advocacy community groups, because we want what's fair, what's equitable, what's just. And we know that this is a not so far of a cry from Senate Bill 202 and how it will not only stack, pack, crack, manipulate, and do all kinds of things to these lines, but we want people to be aware so that then we can mobilize the community to call on the legislators, as my former whip has said, to mobilize the communities, hold our state legislators accountable. It's just ironic how Georgia, we're drawing our own maps, and my colleague, Senator Parent, has pushed for an independent commission to make this happen. But Georgia insists on having it their way. So we need to hold them accountable and then create our own maps, which is why it's so important for us to support organizations such as Fair Districts, so that we are not, so there's not political expediency, but the population will reflect the new Georgia that it has become, and the new Georgia that it will continue to be. I mean, creating opportunities for communities who have not been in the majority or in power, and this is how we do it. We draw fair, just, and equitable maps.
Great, thank you, and thanks for joining us. I'm seeing that there are a lot of questions coming forward in the chat, and Barbara has been screening those. And Barbara, if you can unmute yourself and maybe pose some of the questions, and we'll get our panel involved in those questions.
We have a lot of great questions in the chat. A lot of them relate to what can we do that's most effective, and I think the panel has addressed those in large part. We also have several questions that talk about how do we garner bipartisan support for fair maps, and how do we engage the business community?
Who would like to start with that question? Senator Parent?
So make sure I heard it. It was kind of two-part. Business
Yeah,
community,
two-parter.
and how do we, the first part was, how do we
Get bipartisan support.
How do we
bipartisan
garner
support.
bipartisan support?
I mean, so the bipartisan support is an interesting question, and I want to hear what my colleagues think about this. I think that they are going to probably try to not unveil any maps until they have their votes lined up, right? So it will already have been whipped. They will have already had tough conversations with their people. That does not mean, though, that there will not be disgruntled folks. So we have some idea right now about who might be disgruntled, and who could therefore be natural allies to say these maps are not fair. Of course, once we actually see the maps, we could have a much better sense. But then if you're talking about, so that's like if you're talking about a vote to try to force fair maps to come out of this process. If we're talking about engaging the communities, and that's, you know, also going to talk to the business about the business community as well. I really think that returning to what's already been said about how, in order for a democracy to work and be a battle of ideas, which is supposed to be foundational to our country, although of course, as David said, we've had fits and starts and we've never been perfect on it. I don't think there are many elected officials that would deny that at least to our faces, that they do want to see a democracy and that they believe in it. You know, I think that everyone wants to be able to, every voter wants to be able to elect their representative so that that person is responsive to them and their community and their needs. And to the extent that gerrymandering completely upends that relationship, no one likes it. And for getting Republicans on board to see that maps are unfair, it's as easy as saying, well, you know, would you rather have the citizens in charge of this so that we can have the battle of ideas and live up to the values of democracy? Or would you rather have the Democrats come back and make sure that you guys are locked out of power and there's absolutely nothing you can do about it for the next 10 years? And the business community, you know, they're going to be very wary. They get pushed on a lot of issues these days, which I support, but I would actually just to be totally honest, I would be very surprised if they weighed in on redistricting specifically or mapping. Love to hear what Representative Hugley and Senator Anderson think about that, though.
I'll say that speaking of big corporations, I agree with that point. But when you're talking about small businesses, those businesses that will be in the community, that have built and helped hold the community together, I believe that it's just a matter of education, going through your county or your city chamber or your downtown development authority, and informing these business owners that, you know, your business is housed in a district, and you do want the right representation. So to get involved at this level and to make sure that there are that you have great representation or fair representation for your small business, then I believe that engaging the chamber, the Downtown Development Authority, and the county and all those entities, and as community as a whole, to sit down and draw the map, so that we're not like the video that I've seen of Watts when this district was split. It was gerrymandered and split, and it's cracked and split into so many different districts. We have colleges that are split. We have Georgia Tech. You have UGA. All these colleges, campuses, Clark Atlanta, the campuses, college campuses are split. You don't want your community split like that. So you want to be able to let that business owner that they know that they have a voice. Now, when it comes to the big corporations, I would agree with Senator Parent on that.
Mm-hmm. David, do you have some thoughts on this? Maybe some examples from other places?
Yeah, I mean, let me be really blunt. I think that we have one political party in this country that has turned its back on representative democracy, and that I think they've done so deliberately and intentionally because they don't want to compete for every vote in a multiracial democracy. The good news is that I think that the people of this country reject that notion. And the proof of that is the way that redistricting wins with 60, 70% of the vote everywhere it's on the ballot, no matter what state it's in, whether it's red or blue or purple. So maybe you won't win over any Republicans at the state legislature, but the Republicans in your community can be won over. And they in turn can put pressure on other Republicans. They in turn, if you build them into your coalition, they're a crucial part of what it is you're trying to do if you're trying to win Republican allies who might run for office in Republican primaries, who might show up and tell their legislators that they're watching them and their behavior as well. So I think that's really, really important. And to keep in mind that even though these legislators might not be on your side today, that the people really, I think, do understand that this is a fundamental question of fairness and equity. With regards to the business community, yeah, you're right. The business community is being asked to do a lot of things in Georgia. But the example I would use is Arizona. Arizona was one of the first states in the country to adopt a redistricting commission. They did so in 2000, and they did so because the business community realized that the state's politics had gotten so out of whack that it was creating an unfriendly business environment. They were doing things like, not having MLK Day, as a federal holiday, as a state holiday, the likes. It was the legislature was so out of control that it was bad for business. They lost a Super Bowl, right? They lost a Final Four. Bruce Springsteen stopped playing concerts in the state. When that happens, chambers of commerce and the like begin to say, okay, hey, maybe we've got to try to find a way to rein this back in. The Independent Redistricting Commission initiative in Arizona in 2000 was funded by the business community. It was funded by a shopping mall developer who realized that what was happening there was bad for people making money in the state of Arizona. And I think you're going to see this in Texas as well. I think all these tech companies who come into Texas are going to say, this isn't an environment in which we can have the workers we want. Mm-hmm. It happened in North Carolina after the transgender bathroom bill. A lot of companies said, we're not going to show up in Research Triangle Park because we can't attract the folks we need. So I wouldn't give up on Republicans. I wouldn't give up on the business community. This is going to take all of us together to try to find a way through.
Great. Barbara, I think we have time for maybe one more question.
We've talked a lot about transparency today, and Don Hackney asks, what are the principal objections to the GOP's recent announcement of the procedures they will follow in this process?
Representative Hugley, you want to start us off on that?
Sure, I'll be happy to. The Republicans in the House pretty much adopted the rules that they had from 10 years ago. And technology has changed, the whole world has changed in the last 10 years. And we have the capacity to be much more transparent, to be much more inclusive, to provide for much greater citizen input than we were able to do 10 years ago. So why would you use that as the model when you've gone all across the state and heard time and time again in every location that citizens want to be involved, that they're asking for a transparent process. So the Republicans initially turned a deaf ear to all of that and said, we're going to do what we did the last time. And I guess from their perspective, it worked well for them. So why should they change? But I don't believe they're going to be able to hold on to that position because of what you all are doing here today, because of fair districts, because of fair count, because of the League of Women Voters and the ACLU, the NAACP, and all of these other groups that are igniting the imaginations of citizens all across this state. And the only way we're going to get to transparency is for us to work with our legislators time and time again. And on the prior question, the way we get everybody involved, I believe, not try and digest the entire map, but start with your particular area. Start with Republicans and Democrats in your area and move out from there. That's how all things get started. Small areas and expand out, expand out, and expand out. So that would be what I would say.
Okay. Senator Parent or Senator Anderson, anything else on the redistricting guidelines that appear to have been adopted?
Well, let's note real quick that they can't officially be adopted until we're actually in session. So the whole thing was sort of ludicrous, and Carolyn did an amazing job at laying out a lot of objections. Let me just also add that they, of course, sprung them on everybody in contravention, as Representative Hugley was saying, of exactly what everyone, hundreds of people throughout the state had been asking for weeks in every single hearing. And we also need to note that while some of them may be fine, it's what they're missing and what the process of rolling them out demonstrates to their non-commitment to honoring what all the citizens have been requesting that makes them so odious. You know, I mean, they clearly do not have in there that things like the map should not be drawn for partisan advantage. That seems to be absent. So, you know, to me, it's more what is not in the guidelines and the way they did it, which contravenes all of the transparency that the citizens demand, expect, and deserve than what's actually on the paper. So I really commend my colleagues on the committees for saying, you know what, pretty sure we can do better. And there's still advocacy opportunity around it since they have not been formally adopted. So it's a good thing for all of our advocates on the call to remember that they can still weigh in on what the guidelines actually should look like.
Great, thank you. Well, I wish we could go on for a while.
If I can't, I'm sorry, I've been talking and I'm on mute.
Senator
If I may add, as a member of the Senate Redistricting Committee, we did not see these guidelines, quote unquote, until right before we walked in the room, and they were given to us. And as Senator Parent said, we have been asking for them. Citizens had been asking for them. It's just ironic how this entire redistricting committee meetings across the state have happened. They happened prior to data even being released, not really weighing in on citizen input for bilingual access. Not weighing in on really absolutely hearing what citizens had to say. And we decided that we were not going to accept those guidelines. And of course, we had to make it known that we were just given we were just given the documents as we walked in the room and expected to vote on them, which is possibly a glimpse of how these maps may happen, how the drawing of these maps may happen. But we are still going to continue to push back on what is not good, fair, equitable, or right for Georgia and its citizens, and the changing of the guard that is happening in the new Georgia. But at the end of the day, we will speak up and speak out for the community from a state Senate perspective, from a Georgia Legislative Black Caucus perspective, so that there are many voices in the room, many voices at the table, and that we are holding our elected official colleagues accountable for what happens with these maps.
And one of the things, and you mentioned it, one of the things certainly that the public came out and said was, we want a chance to have another round of public input after the draft maps come out. And that is missing, as Senator Parent said, that's missing from the guidelines. So that's
which is why the Black Caucus waited until the data was released to have our town halls across the state. And tonight we will be in Columbus, Georgia. So if you're in the area, please join us.
Great, thank you. Well, thank you. Thank you, David, for all of your work and your inspiring words for us. And thank you to our legislators for representing us and representing fair redistricting and fighting for fair redistricting. And we are going to move on now to be advocates in the second portion of our program. And thank you all for joining us and for your words. And with that, I think we're going to go to Hildegard, who is one of our advocates here at Fair Districts. And Hildegard is going to walk us through. Thank you all.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for having us.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And Hildegard's going to walk us through the activity that we're now going to work on together. Hildegard?
All right. Hello, everybody. Again, my name is Hildegard Gray, and I'm on the Legislative Advocacy Committee of Fair Districts, Georgia. This is a hard act to follow, Janet, but I will do my best. So let me start by sharing my screen. Okay. So we're going to spend some time talking about what it means to be an effective citizen advocate and what the tools are to be an effective citizen advocate. This is whether you are working for Fair Districts, Georgia, or any other cause that you're going to be working on. So these are hopefully some tools you can take home with you. So the first step, there are 4 steps to this. The first is do your homework, know what you're asking for, and know the background of that. Know whom to contact, decide how to contact them, and then formulate the message. So let's take these one at a time. So the first one, do your homework. We have learned a lot about gerrymandering and redistricting today from David Daley from the panel. Hopefully some of you have been able to attend our town hall meetings that we have every month. If you haven't, you can find links to recordings of the town hall meetings that each one focused on a different component of redistricting and gerrymandering. So there's lots of ways. If you read the paper, there have been numerous articles in the paper about redistricting in the Atlanta Journal, and I believe our letters to the editor group has been very active, and there have been letters to the editors. So there's lots of information about gerrymandering. Know that Georgia is one of the most heavily gerrymandered states. In the 2018 election, I was astonished to hear that 60% of seats were uncontested. And certainly I noticed that in my ballot, there were numerous positions where there was only one person to vote for. It's hardly a feeling when you walk out of the ballot, out of the polling place thinking you've really elected someone. You've simply checked the only box there was to check. Senator Parent, my senator, as well as Janet's, introduced the Democracy Act in 2017, and a very similar act was introduced in the House by Matt Wilson. And every year we have been trying to work with the senators and the representative to bring these to a hearing with so far no luck. They have not even gotten out of committee, but you will be hearing more about that when we go into the 2022 legislative session. As far as the rules, interestingly, the Georgia state constitution requires only that the state legislative districts are contiguous. So that is the only rule that is in our constitution. And that does not apply to the congressional districts, interestingly enough. We've talked a lot, our panelists have talked about the guidelines, so I don't need to talk any more about that. But know that these guidelines are not legally binding and they can be altered at any time. Once the maps are released, they are passed in each, in the House and the Senate by a simple majority, and then they're signed into law by the governor. So that's about it for rules. Okay. Step 2, you need to know whom you're going to contact. We will be providing to you the all the committee members' contact information for the Senate and for the House Reapportionment and Redistricting committees. There's also a link that's going into chat right now for you to find the contact information both for your federal and for your state senators and representatives. So part of our advocacy work today and ongoing, of course, is to contact these people. Now, how are you going to contact them? If we were not in times of COVID, we would be having this meeting down in the under the Golden Dome face-to-face, and we would be inviting you to go to the rope line to ask senators and representatives to come out and talk to you. Well, that's not possible. So this is our virtual rope line. We are going to be sending emails and phoning people and also asking you to post to social media. Now, I find the fastest way to do this is email, particularly when it's something that I want to talk to a whole committee about, because cutting and pasting is very easy. But phone calling also can go very quickly. Know that you will rarely talk to a person. I would say 9 times out of 10 when I do the phone calls, I'm talking to voicemail, but don't worry about that. Leave the message, because many of our senators and representatives do keep track on various issues of the pros and cons based on the emails and phone calls they're getting. So these are very important things to do. You can post to social media. Again, it's not likely that your senator or representative is going to see your post, but your friends will. And I think, as was pointed out in the panel discussion, many of your friends could be Republican, and here's a way to get information out about redistricting and get more people, multiply your voice, get more people to talk about this and to advocate for it. Okay, so emails, phone calls, posting to social media. At some point, we will be able to go back to the Golden Dome and we can actually go to the rope line again. Okay, formulate the message. For today, we are going to be providing you with templates. We have both email templates, phone scripts, and then some pictures and hashtags you can use for social media posts. There are 4 advocacy actions we're proposing today. The first one is to your own senator and representative. And again, it's interesting that the terms of, we talked about we heard the term transparency a lot from the panel, and that happens to be prominent in the messages we're suggesting you send today. Also in the one that you're sending to your own representative and senator, we are asking you to invite them to our Fair Districts Georgia September 22nd legislative briefing, which is happening before the media briefing, on the benchmarks that we've developed based on the 2020 census with our partner Princeton. Let's see, so that's the number 1. The second one is to, again, requesting transparency in the process to the various members of the Senate and the House redistricting committees. The third one, again, I think it was David Daley who mentioned the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. There are components of that which will certainly impact the way redistricting is done. So that's an important one to push. And we're asking you to send messages to Senators Ossoff and Warnock to ask them to continue their support for those. And then the last advocacy ask is Facebook and Twitter, and we have some hashtags and other pictures and things for you to send to them. to post on your social media. Okay, so here's an example of an email template. And I know it's small print, but let me just read it to you quickly. I'm writing to you as a member of the Redistricting Committee to ask that you work with your colleagues to ensure a fair and transparent process, which results in maps that more accurately reflect the racial and partisan makeup of Georgia. An important aspect of a transparent process will be for the redistricting committees to share proposed maps before they are voted on with sufficient time for the public to have meaningful input. So please advocate for a transparent process, allowing for meaningful input into the new maps before they are adopted. We voters deserve to choose our elected officials, not the other way around. Thank you. And again, you would sign that. You would, of course, add your own name and address. So the message is short, succinct, and mentions the transparent process, in this case, twice. So that's the kind of template we're providing. Feel free to modify them, make them a more personal message from you, or cut and paste exactly as they are in the templates. And I mentioned that we will provide committee member contact information. You've got their email, their phone number, if you feel like calling. We've added the admin's name as well. Obviously today, you're not likely to be talking to an admin, but I wanted to say relationships is very important in this whole process of advocating. And often the way you can build a relationship with a senator or with a representative is by having a relationship with their admin. I just want to give you an example of that. One of our legislative team members, Barbara Leach, was able to build a relationship with Allie Farmer, who happens to be Senator Kennedy's admin. And we're quite certain that that relationship is what actually ended up getting us at Fair Districts, Georgia, an invitation to present at the August 30th joint meeting of the redistricting committees. She knew Barbara. She was able to get Barbara's information very quickly and was able to ask or offer us that opportunity when opening occurred. So don't underestimate the value of relationships. These are, by the way, these email addresses are hyperlinked. So you should be able to just click on the link and it will populate, it will open your email application, your email application on whatever your device is and populate the to field. Okay, so in chat, you will find the site where you can find your contact information for your own representatives and senators, and you will also find the link for our templates. We're going to take about 15 minutes for each of you to practice being advocates, to send some emails, and to make some phone calls, and to post to social media. So we hope this is a busy 15 minutes for you. And let me bring up another slide. If you need any kind of help, please post any questions you might have in chat, and we'll do our best to help you. Again, the link to the templates is in chat. It might be easier if you minimize the Zoom window so that you have room on your screen to view the advocacy templates and your email at the same time, or enlarge it and have the advocacy template for the phone call in front of you when you're making your calls. And I already mentioned clicking on the email address for the senators and representatives on the committees will open your mail application and populate the to field. So I have to say, one of my very favorite sayings is from Margaret Mead. Close the chat. Never underestimate the power of a small group of committed people to change the world. In fact, it is the only thing that ever has. So in 15 minutes, if I counted them all right, we sent 83 emails and we made 7 phone calls and 3 social media posts. So thank you to all of you. That is fabulous, fabulous. And that's exactly what we want you to do and keep continuing to do for us. So I hope it was a good experience for you. And all right, I think now I'm gonna turn this back over to Janet.
I guess I have to unmute myself. Well, we really appreciate everyone joining us today. And thank you to Hildegard for putting together the advocacy activity here. This really is an opportunity, or was an opportunity today, to kind of get a little practice with this. We know in the coming weeks that we are going to need to be reaching out to folks to be loud in advocacy, and we wanted you to have this practice today. As we had several folks in the chat say, if you can finish up kind of this activity after we get off. I know I got through emailing all of the senators. I want to go ahead and email all the representatives as well. So hopefully we can continue to do this after we finish up. So we've got some upcoming activities that we want you to know about and to participate in. The first one is our next town hall. We've been doing these monthly town halls, and this is a really important town hall. In September, at our September 27th town hall, we will be unveiling the Princeton benchmarks. And so you will see the work that we've been doing with Princeton on the 2020 census and what we are expecting to see. And we want to hold the legislators accountable to as far as what fair maps look like. We'll also be reviewing a lot of the myths that are out there. You heard a couple of them from our senators today. Talking about, or actually Representative Hugley talked about one of the biggest myths that we hear, which is that the 2011 maps were pre-cleared, and therefore that meant that those were fair maps. So you'll need to come on September 27th to hear the real story related to that. So please register and join us for that important town hall. We're also really continuing to promote. Our partners at Fair Count are doing a lot of great work on mapping and helping folks map their community, and those will be submitted to the legislature. We have to figure out, they're figuring out how to do that efficiently. But they're doing mapping Mondays. Every Monday you will get training to map your community of interest. It's not a long or very involved process, and they're using a slick tool brought to us again by the Princeton Gerrymandering Project called Representable. So please join that. And then one other piece of advocacy that we want everyone to do, if you have not already, is to submit your thoughts, your quote written testimony to the legislative committees. At this bit.ly here, there is a site on the Georgia Legislative webpage to submit your public comments. And the other interesting thing is you get to see everybody else's comments that have been submitted. And that's very interesting to scroll through and see how many of us across the state of Georgia are really demanding fair maps, transparency, and public input. So please, that will just take you a few minutes. You can just put a few lines or as much information as you want in your submission there. And then the last thing, just to, next slide, Hildegard, the last thing to have you watch for, and we think this will be coming out here in the next couple of weeks, but will be interesting now and then even more interesting as draft maps come out. Our cartographer, that we have engaged, who has been working with us to really display all this wonderful information from Princeton Gerrymandering Project, is developing an interactive map. And this map will allow you to zero in on small areas of the state or look at it overall across numbers of different categories. And we've worked with at least one legislator to give us input on what would be really helpful for legislators to see. This is using the census data. And then we will be able to, when the draft maps come out, you'll be able to see compare what is current versus what is coming with or what is proposed in the draft map. So this is going to be a really slick tool added to our map room, which is also a lot of information. So thanks to our mapping and analysis team and to Sarah for putting together this, this cool tool. We'll be announcing this when it comes out, probably within the next week or two. So with that, we are going to finish up this afternoon's activity. And I do want to thank everyone who made today possible, obviously to our panelists and our speaker, our keynote speaker with David Daley. Thanks to Hildegard, who was the person who did everything behind the scenes here. Thanks to Julie Edelson, who put together all of our advocacy messaging. And she is going to be working on additional action alerts as we go through the rest of this process. There may be things that come up that we need lots of voices speaking out on in this process. So watch for action alerts. Julie will be helping us get that information out and opportunities for you to continue to weigh in. So with that, we thank you for participating today. Thank you for the advocacy you're doing. And let's keep it up over the next couple of months so that we can hopefully at least mitigate some of the concerns that we talked about today. Thank you.